A series of child abductions during the late 1980s and early 1990s were attributed to a single offender who caused terror in the communities of Melbourne. An assault that occurred in 1987 would soon be linked to the abductions of two young girls during separate incidents, as well as a third child who was snatched and later murdered. In 1994, Australian police launched Operation Spectrum, a designated investigation with the main task of apprehending the kidnapper and suspected murderer who the media had nicknamed Mr. Cruel. Because of a lack of evidence, this investigation failed to identify the masked home invader, and it would be over 20 years before a fresh inquiry was undertaken. Task Force Apollo, launched in 2010, conducted a review of the original investigation and utilized new technology and investigative techniques in a bid to capture the dangerous child rapist and killer who had terrorized the northern and eastern suburbs of Melbourne.
Just over 30 years ago, a predator sparked unprecedented fear in Melbourne parents and children. To this day, the Australian boogeyman, who is known only as Mr. Cruel, remains unidentified. Mr. Cruel is a pedophilic serial rapist who targeted young girls and is the prime suspect in the abduction and murder of Carmine Chan. In 2016, 25 years after the murder of Carmine Chan, Victorian police increased the reward for the information that leads to Mr. Cruel's arrest and conviction from $100,000 to $1 million. So heinous were his crimes against children that the Victorian police sought the help of the FBI. A profile was provided stating that the offender would most likely live within the vicinity and suggested that he was involved with a school, either in the capacity of an employee or connected in some other way. In 2016, the FBI analysis was made public through the H newspaper. The Victorian police described Mr. Cruel as someone who is highly intelligent. He meticulously planned his crimes and conducted surveillance. There were no forensic traces left at the abduction sites, and he protected his identity by wearing a balaclava. Mr. Cruel would also leave red herrings to misdirect the police and the families of the victims. He was soft-spoken and committed the abductions in an unhurried manner. Police suspect that Mr. Cruel may also be responsible for at least a dozen other heinous attacks on children over a 10-year period. They believe that he would have committed a number of minor offenses, such as stealing underwear from washing lines to masturbating while window peeping before graduating to abduction, rape, and murder. Mr. Cruel is suspected of abducting a 14-year-old girl from her Hampton home in Melbourne's southern suburbs in 1985. Bound, gagged, and blindfolded, the girl was taken to a vacant lot and assaulted. Several hours later, scared and scarred, the girl was dumped at Moorabbin Bowl on the Nepean Highway. The first confirmed attack was on an 11-year-old girl. In 1987, Mr. Cruel broke into a family home in Lower Plenty at 4 a.m. Wearing a mask and armed with a knife and small handgun, he woke the girl's parents. Mr. Cruel forced the parents to lie on their stomachs as he tied their hands and feet, using knots commonly known by sailors and those familiar with securing loads. Gagged and with surgical tape covering their eyes, Mr. Cruel locked them in their bedroom cupboard. Their 6-year-old son was also blindfolded, gagged, and tied to his bed. Mr. Cruel spent 2 hours in the house, taking a break from raping the young girl to make himself a meal. He also stole a box of classical records and a dark blue Parker before leaving. The young girl stated to the police that he made a phone call from the house, threatening another family with physical violence. The police checked the phone records but found no such call made. It was most likely part of his modus operandi to distract police and make his capture less likely. On the 27th of December 1988, Mr. Cruel struck again. This time, he broke into the Wills family home in Ringwood at around 5:30 a.m. Again, he bound and gagged the parents. In his effort to divert the police, he demanded money and acted as if it was a home robbery. His true motive was revealed when he abducted their 10-year-old daughter Sharon. After cutting the telephone lines, he walked into the bedroom which Sharon shared with her younger sisters. He walked up to Sharon and said her name to wake her. It is suspected that he knew her name because the family had been featured in a newspaper article 6 months earlier when their house caught fire. Mr. Cruel blindfolded and gagged Sharon. He also stopped to take a few items of Sharon's clothing before leaving the house. 18 hours later, Sharon was found by a woman standing on a street corner around midnight, near the Bayswater High School. She was wearing only a man's shirt and was wrapped in green garbage bags. Sharon approached the woman and told her calmly, "My name's Sharon Wills, and I was taken from my home early this morning. A man left me here and told me to go and ring home." Sharon was able to give the police details of what happened to her, but was unable to identify her attacker as she was blindfolded throughout her ordeal. The Wills family were so traumatized that they all slept in the lounge room together for weeks, installed a security system, and accepted the donation of a golden retriever for extra protection. No further cases were linked to Mr. Cruel until the 3rd of July 1990. Using the same modus operandi, Mr. Cruel broke into a home in Canterbury at around 11:30 p.m. He cut the phone lines and searched for money before blindfolding and gagging 13-year-old Nicola Linnes. Nicola and her 15-year-old sister, Fiona, were home alone when they were woken by Mr. Cruel. Fiona was tied up and left in her bedroom. Nicola was forced into another room and told to collect her school uniform and runners. He told Fiona that he would release Nicola unhurt if their father paid $25,000. Mr. Cruel took the family's rented Holden Berlina to make his getaway, leaving it a kilometer away from the house. During a press conference, Mr. Linnes begged for Nicola's safe return and was prepared to pay the ransom. Mr. Cruel released Nicola 50 hours later, about 5 kilometers from the family home, without making any contact or any further ransom demands. Nicola was found fully clothed and wrapped in a blanket. Like Sharon, Nicola was unable to give a description of Mr. Cruel. Occasionally, the girls would peek under their blindfolds and were able to describe the bedroom and bathrooms of the house or flat in which they were being held. One of the girls described the bedroom she was kept in as having beige or cream carpet, peach full-length curtains, a double bed with a peach bed head, an orange lamp base with a lemon and white striped lampshade, light-colored walls, and a white door. There was a bookcase or cabinet at the opposite end of the room that had been covered with a dark blanket, possibly to hide personal items that could be used to identify Mr. Cruel. The bathroom was described as having a triple sliding door shower, a bath, and a wash basin next to the shower, a dual flush toilet near the bathroom. During their captivity, the girls heard planes flying overhead, which were matched to the telemarine flight paths. Police began a search in areas close to the airport. Over 30,000 houses were door-knocked and looked at. The house, unit or flat, had a drive on the right-hand side and a small number of steps to the front door. Mr. Cruel's last known victim was 13-year-old Carmine Chan. Carmine attended the same school as Nicola Linnes. She lived with her parents John and Phyllis Chan, and with her 3 younger sisters Carly and Karen, in the prestigious suburb of Templestowe. The Chans owned 3 Chinese restaurants in the neighboring suburbs and would often leave Carmine to babysit her sisters. Mr. Cruel broke into the Chans' luxury home at about 8:40 p.m. on Saturday, April 13, 1991. Police believe Mr. Cruel had been keeping his victims under surveillance for weeks before attacking. He would have known when Mr. and Mr. Chan had left. On this night, the girls were watching television in Carmine's room. During an ad break, Carmine and Carly went to the kitchen to get something to eat. It was here that the knife-wielding Mr. Cruel confronted the girls. He forced the younger sisters Carly and Karen into the bedroom cupboard, telling them, "Don't worry, I won't hurt you. I only want your money." Mr. Cruel kept Carmine with him, promising her sisters she would come back and get them. He then pushed a bed against the cupboard, trapping the girls inside. They never saw Carmine again. She was wearing only a white, short-sleeved nightie and was no shoes. Once Carmine's sisters had freed themselves, they immediately rang their father and told him a man had stolen Carmine. When the police arrived at the Chan home, they found that Mr. Cruel had spray-painted Mrs. Chan's car with the words "more and more to come" and "payback, Asian drug dealer," an obvious red herring to distract the police. Time spent on checking the Chan family's background found that they had no involvement with any drug-related enterprises. Believing that Carmine would be eventually returned, John and Phyllis Chan made heartbreaking appeals. Sharon Wills had been released 18 hours after her abduction, and Nicola Linnes after 50. Unfortunately, Carmine's body would not be found until the following year, on April 9, 1992. For days short of the first anniversary of Carmine's abduction, a man walking along Edgar's Creek, Thomastown, spotted what looked like a human skull and notified the Thomastown police. Forensics confirmed that it belonged to Carmine and that she had been shot in the head 3 times. It is believed that Carmine may have seen Mr. Cruel's face, which is why she was murdered, instead of being released like the other victims. The case of Mr. Cruel has continued to haunt Australians and the Victorian police to this day. During the first investigation, Task Force Spectrum interviewed over 27,000 people and examined 30,000 houses suspected of being used by Mr. Cruel. The 40-strong task force spent around $3.8 million over the 3 years they chased Mr. Cruel. By the time Task Force Spectrum was disbanded in January 1994, they had ended up with 7 suspects that they were unable to eliminate. These men's dossiers are known as the Sierra Files. Numerous pieces of information still continue to trickle in, but none have helped to identify Mr. Cruel, and he still hasn't been caught.
Please! Please, my daughter!
In the face of darkness embodied, let us not abandon our humanity, for even amidst the shadows cast by cruelty may our resolve to seek truth and justice shine brighter, illuminating the path towards healing and resolution. Nelson Mandela.
Sean Emma O'Callaghan, born on June 3, 1988, was a 22-year-old British woman who disappeared from Swindon, Wiltshire, England, after being last seen at a nightclub in the town in the early hours of March 19, 2011. Her body was found on 24 March near Uffington in Oxfordshire. On October 19, 2012, at Bristol Crown Court, Christopher Halliwell, 48, of Nive, Swindon, pleaded guilty to O'Callaghan's murder.
On the 19th of March 2011, Sian O'Callaghan was captured on CCTV leaving Swindon's Suja nightclub to walk 800 meters to the flat she shared with her boyfriend, Kevin Reap. In Swindon's Old Town area, Reap sent O'Callaghan a text message. Analysis later showed that her mobile phone was in the Savernake Forest area, 12 miles away, at the time the message was received. On the 20th of March, Reap contacted the police and reported O'Callaghan as missing. The police issued their first public appeal for information and announced that they had begun searching Savernake Forest. They stated that the time that elapsed between O'Callaghan's appearance on the club's CCTV and her mobile phone signal meant that the journey from Swindon to the forest could only have been made in a vehicle. On the 22nd of March, approximately 400 members of the public joined the police in their search of the forest. The same day, an anonymous donor offered a £20,000 reward for information that would lead to finding O'Callaghan. On the 23rd of March, police announced that analysis of O'Callaghan's mobile phone signals led to the identification of a number of hotspots to be investigated. Detective Superintendent Stephen Fulcher of Wiltshire Police said that the investigation was moving at a rapid pace and that significant lines of inquiry were being developed. Members of the public were asked to stand down from searches. On the 24th of March, police made an urgent appeal for witnesses of a green Toyota Avensis with taxi markings, which had been seen between Swindon and Savernake Forest shortly after O'Callaghan's disappearance. On the afternoon of the 24th of March, police arrested a 47-year-old taxi cab driver, Christopher Hallowell, from Swindon on suspicion of kidnapping. The arrest was made at an Asda supermarket in North Swindon, where a green Toyota Avensis taxi was also seized. Later the same day, O'Callaghan's body was found in a shallow grave near Uffington, Oxfordshire. On the 26th of March, the suspect was charged with O'Callaghan's murder. During a news conference on the 26th of March, Detective Superintendent Stephen Fulcher stated that tests revealed O'Callaghan had not been sexually assaulted. On the 1st of April, the inquest at Oxford Coroner's Court was told that it was likely O'Callaghan died from head injuries, though a forensic pathologist from the Home Office had yet to confirm a precise cause of death. O'Callaghan's funeral was held at Kingsdown Crematorium on the 18th of April 2011. Christopher Hallowell, born in Swindon, Wiltshire, worked as a taxi driver and had a troubled childhood, reportedly suffering from neglect and abuse, which may have contributed to his later behavior. Exploring his early life can provide insights into his psychological development. There is also speculation that Hallowell may be connected to other unsolved cases. He had extensive knowledge of remote areas and had previously boasted about having killed others, though no additional charges have been brought against him. Including this angle could highlight the potential breadth of his criminal activities. He gained notoriety for the murder of Sian O'Callaghan in 2011 and later for the murder of Becky Godden Edwards, whose remains were found in 2011, but whose murder had occurred several years earlier. Hallowell's psychological profile indicates a fascination with serial killers, suggesting a deeper, pathological drive behind his actions, possibly emulating the killers he idolized or satisfying his violent impulses. A desire for control and power over his victims might have been a significant motivating factor. His behavior during the investigation, including leading police to multiple bodies, demonstrates a possible lack of remorse and a level of manipulation, indicative of a psychopathic or sociopathic personality. Sian O'Callaghan disappeared after leaving a nightclub in Swindon in March 2011. She was last seen walking home, a distance of approximately 800 meters. Hallowell, a taxi driver, likely exploited his position to offer her a ride, possibly under the pretense of helping her. The exact motive for O'Callaghan's murder remains unclear. However, it is known that she was not sexually assaulted, which may suggest that the motive could have been related to a sudden act of violence rather than a premeditated plan involving sexual assault. Becky Godden Edwards was last seen alive in 2003. Her remains were discovered in 2011, but Hallowell led police to her burial site. Godden Edwards had a troubled life and was known to have had issues with drug addiction and involvement in sex work. It is possible that Hallowell met her under these circumstances. Like with O'Callaghan, the specific motive for Godden Edwards' murder is not clear. However, it has been suggested that Hallowell had a propensity for violence and may have derived some form of gratification or control from committing these acts. The disappearance of Sally and John, a 23-year-old woman engaged in street-based work in Swindon in 1995, remains a haunting mystery that has drawn renewed attention in light of Christopher Hallowell's criminal activities. Sally Ann was last seen in the vicinity of Swindon's red light district, where she worked, before vanishing without a trace. Despite extensive investigations and appeals for information, her whereabouts remained unknown for years, leaving her family and authorities desperate for answers. The case took on a new dimension following Hallowell's arrest for the murders of Sian O'Callaghan and Becky Godden Edwards, leading to the reopening of Sally Ann's case amidst suspicions of a potential connection to Hallowell. Hallowell's arrest reignited interest in Sally Ann's disappearance due to striking parallels between her case and those of his confirmed victims. Both Sally Ann and Hallowell's known victims were associated with Swindon's red light district, suggesting a possible pattern in his targeting of vulnerable individuals in the area. Furthermore, the geographical proximity of Sally Ann's last known whereabouts to Hallowell's known hunting grounds has fueled speculation of his involvement in her disappearance. As investigators delve deeper into the case, the quest for justice for Sally and John continues, with hopes that answers will finally emerge after years of uncertainty and anguish. Christopher Hallowell's court appearances have been significant events in the legal process surrounding his crimes. In October 2012, he faced trial at Bristol Crown Court after pleading guilty to the murder of Sian O'Callaghan, whose disappearance in March 2011 had shocked the nation. During this trial, details emerged about the circumstances surrounding Sian's disappearance and subsequent murder, shedding light on Hallowell's confession and the discovery of Sian's body. The proceedings highlighted the gravity of the crime and provided closure for Sian's family and loved ones. Following his initial conviction, Hallowell faced another trial in September 2016, this time for the murder of Becky Godden Edwards, whose remains he had led police to after his arrest. The trial, also held at Bristol Crown Court, delved into the evidence linking Hallowell to Becky's disappearance and murder. Forensic evidence and witness testimonies were presented, resulting in Hallowell's conviction for a second murder and another life imprisonment sentence. These court proceedings underscored the meticulous investigative work and legal efforts undertaken to ensure justice for Hallowell's victims. However, Hallowell's case also brought legal controversies to the forefront, particularly regarding the methods used by law enforcement to obtain his confession. Detective Superintendent Stephen Fulcher's decision to bypass legal protocols during the investigation led to disciplinary action against him and raised questions about the admissibility of Hallowell's confession in court. Despite these challenges, the court proceedings surrounding Christopher Hallowell's crimes stand as crucial milestones in the pursuit of justice and the resolution of some of the most heinous crimes in recent memory.
Charged with this and I'm found guilty, I'll get natural.
Right.
I mean, not being funny, I'm 50 now, I've got 25 years to go, so chances aren't looking good as it is.
Yeah.
If I wrap this up in the next few hours, any other charges against me that will be brought, there's a bits of past, I think you probably know about various things in the past, there's car thefts, break-ins, bits and pieces, some more serious. Will clearing this up be enough to stop everything else? I don't want to keep coming back every couple of years on a different charge all the time. So what I'm saying is, if I can clear this up in the next few hours, will everything else be forgotten? Because at the end of the day, I'm going to get a sentence to it. I'm just going to, they're going to turn the lock and say, that's it, you're done. Right, so what I'm saying is, I can resolve the matter, but I don't want you coming back every couple of years, every 5 years, every 10 years, whatever, with this, with something like that. Because if it goes to court, and I'm found guilty, that's it. They lock me up and throw me away the key. I'm under no illusion, I'm not stupid. So that'll be it.
One of the most elusive serial killers, the Zodiac is believed to be responsible for numerous murders throughout the San Francisco Bay Area from 1968 until 1970. The Zodiac Killer, he attacked courting couples at isolated areas, binding then stabbing or ambushing the victims and shooting them dead, leaving few survivors who could offer a description of a killer who enjoyed communicating with police and the press in order to gain recognition for his nefarious crimes. Zodiac sent many letters and complex ciphers to the authorities, daring the authorities to crack his codes and discover his unclaimed victims. By 1974, the Zodiac had claimed 37 victims, but less murders were actually attributed to the killer, despite several earlier crimes dating back to 1963, which appeared strikingly similar to his modus operandi. Eventually, the communication stopped and it was believed the Zodiac had either died or was incarcerated, and despite hundreds of potential suspects, his crimes have so far remained unsolved. Several years before anyone would hear of the Zodiac and his crimes, the murder of a young woman went unsolved in Riverside on Sunday, October 30th, 1966. 18-year-old Sherry Jo Bates was brutally murdered near the parking lot of the Riverside City College's library just before Halloween. She had been slashed with a knife across her chest area 3 times, once on her back and 7 times across her throat, which had been cut so deep she was nearly decapitated. The killer had managed to lure Bates by disabling her lime green Volkswagen and then waited for her to return to her car. Almost a month later, the murderer apparently made contact with police. On November 29, 1966, two carbon copies of an anonymous letter were sent to the Riverside Enterprise and the Riverside Police claiming responsibility for death of Sherry Jo Bates. The letters sent on April 30, 1967 to the Riverside Press and Police Department contained a curious symbol, which appeared to resemble the letter Z, that began with a strange squiggle much like the number 3. The envelopes were mailed with excessive postage, similar to the later letters sent by the Zodiac. Is it possible that Sherry Jo Bates was the Zodiac's first victim? The case of the Zodiac Killer began on December 20, 1968, when 17-year-old David Faraday picked up and his girlfriend, 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen, from her home, telling her parents they were going to a Christmas concert. Instead, he drove them to a lover's lane near Lake Herman Road, where they arrived at around 10:40 p.m. Before this time, a witness later reported spotting a light-colored hardtop, possibly a 4-door Chevrolet Impala, which was parked near the gated entrance to the pumping station just off Lake Herman Road at around 9 p.m. Not long after this, a young couple who were parked in the lover's lane reported another, which passed them heading west towards Vallejo, but then slowly backed up towards them. The driver stared at the young couple, and they felt so ill at ease, they immediately drove off towards Benicia. The car proceeded to follow them until they took the first exit, while the driver continued east to Lake Herman Road. The same light-colored Chevrolet Impala was seen again by another witness at around 10 p.m. At approximately 11:10 p.m., half an hour after arriving at the same spot as the previous couple, Faraday and Jensen were shot to death. A car had pulled up alongside them, and the driver exited the vehicle and began firing at the couple. From the evidence left at the scene, investigators were able to determine from shell casings and footprints that the killer had likely used either a .22 rifle or a handgun loaded with .22L or ammunition and walked up behind the victim's car, shooting the right rear window and then the left near tire. He then came around to the front left side, and at this point the 2 teenagers were able to exit the passenger side door of Faraday's brown Rambler in an attempt to escape. It's believed Faraday was killed by a single shot to the head, while he was standing by the right rear wheel after scrambling out of the car, and although she managed to get out of the car alive, Jensen's body was found 30 feet from the rear bumper. She had been struck by several bullets, 5 of which penetrated the right of her back, either as she was moving or as she lay wounded on the ground. In total, 10 bullets had been fired, with 5 hitting Jensen and 2 missing, 1 killing Faraday, and the 2 fired into the car. The accuracy of the shots fired seemed to indicate the killer was somewhat competent in the use of firearms, but by no means a skilled marksman. According to the coroner, Jensen was hit from no more than 10 feet away. The gruesome murders would have taken less than a few seconds to commit, and the killer was back in his vehicle and driving away from the crime scene. His escape may have even been witnessed by Stella Borges, who described a light-colored Chevrolet Impala heading away from Lake Herman Road towards Benicia just before she discovered the victims' bodies. Despite a thorough investigation by Solano County Sheriff's Detective SGT, Les Lundblad, police were unable to determine a motive for the crime, and with few witnesses to the actual murders and no suspects, the Solano County Sheriff's Office case #V-556 for hit a dead end. A reward set up by students at the victim's high school failed to garner any new information. For separate attacks involving 7 people have been definitively attributed to the Zodiac Killer. The first confirmed incident took place on the night of December 20, 1968, when 17-year-old David Faraday and his 16-year-old girlfriend, Betty Lou Jensen, were shot to death near their car at a remote spot on Lake Herman Road, on the outskirts of Vallejo, California. Police were baffled, unable to determine the motive for the crime or a suspect. Early in the morning of July 5, 1969, Darlene Farron, age 22, and her boyfriend, Mike Mago, age 19, were sitting in parked car in a similarly remote Vallejo location when they were approached by a man with a flashlight. The figure fired multiple shots at them, killing Farron and seriously wounding Mago. Within an hour of the incident, a man called the Vallejo Police Department, giving them the location of the crime scene and claiming responsibility for both that attack and the 1968 murders of Faraday and Jensen. Despite evidence that included fingerprints, Mago's description, the decoded cipher, and a wave of tips and leads, police were unable to track down the Zodiac Killer. On the evening of September 27, 1969, he struck again, approaching young couple Cecilia Shepard and Brian Hartnell as they relaxed on an isolated part of the shore of Lake Berryessa in Napa County. Wearing a hood and a shirt bearing a circle cross symbol, he tied them up before brutally stabbing them, scrawling a message for police on their car door and leaving the scene. He then called the Napa Police Department to claim responsibility. Shepard and Hartnell were both in critical condition but alive when emergency services arrived. However, Shepard died of her wounds shortly thereafter. 2 weeks later, on October 11, 1969, the Zodiac claimed another life, shooting 29-year-old taxi driver Paul Stein in San Francisco's Presidio Heights neighborhood. As the murder didn't seem to fit the Zodiac's pattern, it was initially deemed a robbery until the San Francisco Chronicle received a letter claiming the crime. At least 5 other murders have been tentatively linked to the Zodiac Killer, including the 1963 shooting of Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards near Santa Barbara, California, and the 1966 stabbing death of college student Sherry Jo Bates in Riverside, California, with descriptions from witnesses who had seen a man leaving the scene of Paul Stein's 1969 murder. Police were able to create and circulate a composite sketch of the killer. But despite mounting evidence and the investigation of numerous suspects, the Zodiac remained at large. More than 5 decades after the Faraday-Jensen murders, no suspect has ever been arrested. The inability to identify the Zodiac Killer has continued to frustrate law enforcement. On August 1, 1969, the San Francisco Examiner, San Francisco Chronicle, and Vallejo Times-Herald each received an identical handwritten letter in an envelope without a return address. Beginning, "Dear Editor, I am the killer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman." The letters contained details from the Zodiac Killer's murders that only the perpetrator could have known. The killer went on to threaten further attacks if the letters weren't printed on the front page of the papers. Each letter closed with a symbol consisting of a circle with a cross through it, in what would come to be known as the Zodiac Killer's symbol. The letters were also each accompanied by one part of a 3-part cipher that he claimed contained his identity. While Bay Area police departments, with the support of the FBI, worked feverishly to track down the killer, another letter soon arrived at the San Francisco Examiner. Beginning, "Dear Editor, this is the Zodiac speaking." It also described the murders in detail and taunted police for not having been able to crack his code or catch him. Several days later, high school teacher Donald Hardin and his wife, Betty, were able to solve the cipher. "I like killing people because it is so much fun," it read. "It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all." 3 days after the 4th known Zodiac killing, the 1969 murder of taxi driver Paul Stein, the San Francisco Chronicle received a letter claiming the crime. Written in the same erratic print as the Zodiac's previous letters, it gave the details of Stein's murder and was accompanied by a bloody scrap of Stein's shirt. At the end of the letter, the killer mused that he would next shoot out the tire of a school bus and pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out. The Zodiac Killer continued his taunting correspondence with Bay Area papers, in which he included more ciphers, claimed to have committed several more murders, and mocked the police for their inability to catch him. In 1974, the letters stopped, though the investigation continues to this day. The mystery surrounding the Zodiac case also continues to fascinate the public and has inspired more than its fair share of theories regarding the killer's identity, ranging from plausible to absurd. These include the claims that he was Unabomber Ted Kaczynski, or convicted murderer Charles Manson, or that he eventually moved to Scotland and committed more murders there before finding happiness and giving up his wicked ways. Some other theories include Arthur Lee Allen. True crime author and former San Francisco Chronicle cartoonist Robert Graysmith wrote two separate works on the killer, 1986's Zodiac and 2002's Zodiac Unmasked, ultimately identifying a man named Arthur Lee Allen as the most likely suspect. Allen died in 1992, however, and was never conclusively connected to any of the murders. Earl Van Best Jr. In 2014, HarperCollins published The Most Dangerous Animal of All by Gary L. Stewart, in which he claims that his father, Earl Van Best Jr., who bears a strong resemblance to the man in the police sketch, was the Zodiac Killer. Louis Myers. Another man came forward in 2014 to reveal that a friend named Louis Myers had confessed to being the killer before his death in 2002. Certain events in Myers' history matched up with those connected to the Zodiac, but as with Allen and Van Best, there was no conclusive proof. Multiple Killers, a 2023 Peacock docuseries myth of the Zodiac Killer posits, the murders were carried out by multiple people. It's very unusual for cold cases to have this much information. But if you read all the police files, you see that there's very little linking these crimes together. Series director Andrew Knock told the New York Post, different weapons, different MO, different victim profile, even eyewitness statements, different locations or a trophy being taken from one, but none of the others. In 2020, after more than 50 years, amateur code breakers solved the Zodiac Killer's cipher. The decoded message read, "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show," which brings up a point about me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner, because I now have enough slaves to work for me, where everyone else has nothing when they reach paradise, so they are afraid of death. I am not afraid, because I know that my new life will be an easy one in paradise death. In October 2021, a team of 40 former law enforcement investigators, called the Case Breakers, claimed to have identified the Zodiac Killer. They believed that Gary Francis Post, who died in 2018, was responsible for the murders. According to USA Today, this claim relied largely on DNA evidence found at the scene of Sherry Jo Bates' murder in 1966 at Riverside City College in California. Additionally, the Case Breakers claimed that Post had the same shoe size and similar forehead scars to the Zodiac Killer, and that letters to the press contained anagrams of his name. However, police have remained adamant that Bates is not a confirmed victim of the Zodiac Killer, meaning Post was not made a suspect. Beginning in March 1990, a series of shootings occurred in New York City in what appeared to be random attacks. The first and second victims survived, but the third died later in hospital after being shot in May 1990. Letters sent to the New York Post and 60 Minutes strengthened a theory that some detectives already suspected about the killer, that he was the San Francisco Zodiac. The letters were written in a bizarre style and contained the phrase, "This is the Zodiac," in a similar but not identical calling card of the original Zodiac. But it soon became apparent that this was not the same criminal. But this did not stop the media from sensationalizing this latest string of Zodiac Killer crimes, something that caused fear to New Yorkers who believed they were now subject to the Zodiac's killing spree. After his fourth victim survived, the New York Zodiac wrote to the Post claiming in San Francisco killed a man in the park with a gun and killed a woman with a knife and killed a man in the taxi cab with gun. The killer was attempting to connect his crimes with those of the original Zodiac, but few were fooled. A further 6 people were shot by the New York Zodiac, 2 of whom died from their wounds. Much like his San Francisco counterpart, Zodiac also sent coded messages to the police and press, and much like the original, this killer went long periods without killing. Then, in 1993, the Zodiac's reign of terror appeared to have ended. It would take several years before the perpetrator was caught, during a chance encounter at the Zodiac's family home, where a domestic disturbance call would lead to his arrest. On May 27, 1997, just before pupils arrived at the Tanahata Elementary School in the Suma ward of Kobe, Japan, the head of student Junhei's was found in front of the school gates. The victim had been beheaded with a handsaw, and the remains left for students to discover when they arrived that morning. A note, written in red pen, was found stuffed in his mouth. The letter identified the killer as Sakakibara and read in part, "This is the beginning of the game. Try and stop me if you can, stupid police." Due to the symbolism used and the style of the letter, it was clear that the author was influenced by the Zodiac murders of San Francisco. Several more attacks were committed by the same killer, and a young girl, Ayaka Yamashita, was murdered. On June 28th, a 14-year-old high school student was arrested for the crimes. Known as Boya in the media, his real name was not officially released to Japanese law. However, he was eventually identified as Shinichiro Azuma. During the course of the investigation, there have been numerous developments, including the solution to one of the Zodiac ciphers, as well as promising suspects that have been proposed as recently as October 2021. However, none have been officially accepted by law enforcement and investigators as a definitive resolution to the case. The only way the Zodiac case will ever be solved now is with a breakthrough in DNA. Much in the same way, the Golden State Killer was apprehended, or if evidence or a confession is left by the perpetrator after their death. Until then, the case will remain one of the high-profile unsolved serial murder investigations. In 2022, author Jared Kobik wrote an investigative book titled How to Find Zodiac and hypothesized the killer's identity as Paul Dorr, a San Francisco Bay Area man who died in 2007. He found that both Dorr and the Zodiac had shown an interest, through writing, in making homemade bombs, particularly of ammonium nitrate and fertilizer. Along with having a similar build to the suspected killer, Dorr also worked at a shipyard in Vallejo at the time of the murders. Number 10. The Zodiac has been the inspiration for films and TV shows. Number 9. There might have been more victims. Number 8. There were early mistakes in the police investigation. Number 7. There were multiple Zodiac subjects. Number 6. A teacher cracked the Zodiac's first cipher. Number 5. The Zodiac murders followed a similar pattern. Number 4. People have come forward to claim relatives as the Zodiac. Number 3. The Zodiac communicated in code. Number 2. The Zodiac taunted authorities. Number 1. The Zodiac Killer was never caught.
Even in the darkest of times, we must hold on to the belief that light will prevail. The deeds of the Zodiac Killer remind us of the importance of vigilance and the pursuit of justice. But let us not succumb to fear, for it is in our unity and determination that we find strength.